They were involved with another person. Not because you were not enough, not because you were easy to replace, but because something within them was not ready to deal with what was real and honest. And now they are holding something they can no longer avoid or keep buried inside themselves. What they need to say is not simple, and it is not easy for them, because while they were physically present in another place with someone else, a part of them emotionally never truly left you. And that truth has now become something they cannot deny anymore. Have you ever had a feeling that a connection never actually ended, even when everything on the outside made it look like it was over? Something still remained, quietly unfinished, staying in the background of your thoughts. That is exactly where they have been existing, not exactly in the past, but in a space where truth was postponed, but never fully erased. Because real connection does not just disappear. It waits, it stays, and eventually it demands to be seen clearly, without confusion or denial. They chose what felt safe instead of what was truly real for them at that time. They moved toward what was familiar instead of what was quietly pulling them from deeper inside. They held on to what felt easier to manage instead of what could have actually changed them in a meaningful and lasting way. In doing so, they convinced themselves that comfort meant peace, even though something inside them continued to question that decision. They stayed where everything was predictable, where emotions did not demand too much, and where they could remain in control without being challenged. But deep down, there was always a quiet awareness that something more meaningful had been left behind. Something that would have required more courage than they were ready to show at that point in their life. And once that awareness started to grow inside them, it did not fade away. It stayed. It stayed with them in moments they could not escape, in silence they could not fill, and in thoughts they could not distract themselves from. It appeared in quiet evenings, in the space between conversations, and in moments when everything became still enough for truth to surface. The feeling never demanded attention, but it also never allowed itself to be ignored. It remained steady, reminding them that something important had been left unresolved for far too long. Over time, even the days that once felt manageable started to feel limited, as if life had slowly turned into routine instead of growth. They began to notice how much of themselves they had been holding back, just to keep things easy and avoid complications. They avoided deeper emotions, avoided honest reflection, and avoided situations that would force them to confront who they really were inside. This created a quiet distance within themselves, a feeling of being present in life, but not fully engaged with it. And eventually, that distance became something they could no longer ignore. On the surface, what they had with someone else may have looked stable, but it did not carry the same emotional depth or meaning. What they experienced with you had something different, something that reached deeper and stayed longer in their heart. Because real and meaningful connections do not disappear just because someone walks away from them. They remain in the background of memory, waiting to be acknowledged without pressure. Over time, those feelings begin to return, not in loud ways, but in quiet reminders that something important once existed. And at some point, they stopped lying to themselves about it. Not through one sudden realization, but slowly, honestly, and in a way that felt uncomfortable but true. They came to understand that they were never fully alive in the place they chose to stay. Something essential was always missing, even when they tried not to see it. And no matter how much they convinced themselves they had moved on, a part of them remained emotionally unfinished with you. This realization did not come gently. It came with honesty that forced them to look at their own choices without excuses. They started to understand that they never gave that connection a real chance. Not because it lacked meaning, but because it required courage they were not ready for at that time. Courage to be open, to be vulnerable, and to face uncertainty without protection. Instead of stepping into that, they stepped away from it. They chose safety over growth, even while something inside them quietly knew what they were leaving behind. And now that awareness carries a message they cannot ignore anymore. It is not dramatic, it is not polished, and it is not asking for sympathy. It simply exists as a quiet truth inside them. They now see what you represented in their life with clearer understanding. They realize that what they were avoiding was not only you, but also parts of themselves they were not ready to face. And that realization has changed something deep inside them in a lasting way. It has shifted how they see their past, their choices, and what truly mattered. This is not a loud change. It is quiet, but permanent. Because once someone clearly sees their own avoidance, they cannot unsee it. They cannot go back to pretending it never mattered. Whether they reach out or stay silent, something inside them has already shifted. The illusion they were holding onto has broken, and what remains is clarity mixed with discomfort. That clarity forces them to sit with what they avoided and accept the emotional weight of it. There is no easy escape from it once it becomes clear. And what matters most for you to understand is this. None of it was ever about your worth. It was never a reflection of your value as a person. It was always about their emotional readiness and their fear at that time. You were not replaced by someone better. You simply crossed paths with someone who was not ready to meet you at the level you were standing on. And now they are left facing the outcome of their own choices, carrying everything they avoided and never fully resolved. Whether they speak about it or not, that is what remains for them internally. This is not a dramatic return or an immediate confession. It is a slow settling of truth inside their awareness. You were real, and real connections leave an impact that cannot be erased by time, distraction, or convenience. Their choices were never a reflection of your value, but a reflection of their fear and emotional limitations at that stage in life. The hesitation, distance, and inconsistency all came from fear, not from a lack of understanding of what you meant to them. And now that fear has been faced in some way, it has left them more aware, more honest, and more conscious of what their actions cost emotionally. They now carry a clarity that feels heavy and undeniable. In that clarity, they can see what they ignored, what they delayed, and what cannot simply be undone. They can see the impact of their silence and emotional absence on someone who deserved honesty, presence, and genuine effort. This awareness does not bring comfort. It brings understanding that lingers. It stays in quiet moments, in reflection, and in memories they cannot fully dismiss. It is not asking for anything to be fixed. It is not asking for reconciliation. It is simply recognition of what was real and what it meant. They are no longer running from it in the way they once did. They have faced their emotional avoidance, their hesitation, and their fear of vulnerability. And through that, they now clearly understand something they could not fully admit before. The person they hesitated to fully show up for was always you. That truth carries emotional weight they cannot ignore anymore. It has reshaped how they understand connection, honesty, and emotional presence. Even if nothing changes externally, even if no action is taken, the understanding remains. You are no longer seen as something replaceable or secondary, but as a meaningful connection they were not ready for at the time, and that truth will continue to stay with them. It will follow them into future experiences where emotional depth appears again, shaping how they respond and what they choose. What comes next in your own life is no longer about confusion or waiting. It becomes about clarity, choice, and self-respect. Take a moment with this truth. Let yourself understand what has passed and what still matters for your own path forward. Trust your inner voice and the strength you have built through your own experiences. You already know what feels right for you and what you deserve in return. On the surface, someone may appear fully moved on or committed elsewhere, but emotionally, unresolved feelings can still exist in complex ways beneath that surface. This is not simple betrayal or simple attachment, but a deeper reflection of how fear, timing, and emotional growth shape human decisions over time. Fear of closeness, fear of being vulnerable, fear of losing control, and even fear of facing one's own emotional truth can lead a person to split their attention or avoid what they are truly feeling inside. This kind of inner resistance often builds slowly over time, and it becomes a quiet barrier that stops them from fully accepting their emotions. In those moments, they may move toward other connections not because of real love, but because of comfort, distraction, or the need to avoid going deeper into their own feelings. It is less about true emotional direction and more about escaping what feels heavy or difficult to face. At the same time, the person they were deeply connected to remains present in their thoughts in a very quiet but persistent way. Even if they do not speak about it openly with others, that presence continues through memories, silent comparisons, and unspoken thoughts that stay with them longer than expected. It shapes their emotional world in ways that are not always visible from the outside, but are strongly felt within their inner heart and mind. Even when they try to move forward, something in them still holds space for what once existed, even if they do not fully admit it. Regret becomes a meaningful part of this process when someone avoids emotional truth or delays a real connection that mattered deeply. Over time, they eventually begin to feel the result of that avoidance in a quiet but undeniable way. This realization often arrives slowly, not all at once, usually during reflection in moments of stillness or when there are no distractions left to escape from their own thoughts. It can feel subtle at first, but it becomes stronger with awareness and time. It is not about simply missing someone on a surface emotional level alone. It goes deeper than that. It is about clearly seeing the choices that were made, understanding the fear that guided those choices, and recognizing the missed chance to fully value a real emotional connection that once existed. When a person begins to see this clearly, it can feel both painful and awakening at the same time, because it brings honesty they may have avoided before. That understanding does not come quickly or easily for them. It builds slowly over time, becoming stronger with each moment of honesty they allow themselves to accept. Each reflection adds another layer of awareness, and each memory becomes clearer in meaning. And once it is fully seen, it stays within them, shaping how they move forward and how they understand what truly matters in their life going ahead. Regret of this kind often changes how a person views their past decisions and their emotional patterns. It is not just a passing feeling, but something that stays and continues to influence their thoughts in quiet moments. It becomes a teacher in its own way, showing them what avoidance cost them and what emotional truth requires from them moving forward. This kind of regret is powerful because it brings a person face to face with accountability, humility, and real inner growth that lasts over time. It does not allow easy escape or quick distraction from the truth anymore. Instead, it gently but firmly asks them to look directly at their own choices and the impact those choices created on others. This process can feel uncomfortable, but it is also where emotional maturity begins to form. At the same time, growth is never one-sided or limited to only one person in this kind of experience. In this journey, while one individual is learning to face fear, accept responsibility, and understand emotional truth more clearly, the other person is also changing in their own way, with strength and awareness. They are learning to set stronger boundaries to protect their peace and to value their self-respect more deeply than before, even when it requires distance for a time. This kind of growth is not always loud or visible, but it is steady and real. This creates a situation where both individuals continue to evolve, often at different speeds, but still moving in similar directions internally over time. Even if they are not in each other's lives in the same way, their personal growth continues in parallel. Life often works in this quiet way, where lessons are learned separately but still connected through experience. When clarity finally arrives for one person, the other may already have developed a deeper sense of strength, awareness, and emotional understanding in their own path. This shift ensures that any future interaction, if it ever takes place, is no longer based on confusion, emotional need, or uncertainty at all. Instead, it becomes rooted in conscious choice, self-awareness, and emotional maturity that feels more stable and grounded. The dynamic between them changes because both individuals are no longer standing in the same emotional place they once were, even if the memory of that connection still exists within them. Time changes perspective, and experience changes emotional understanding in ways that cannot be reversed. Even when someone appears to move forward on the surface, parts of their emotional world can remain connected to what was never fully understood or resolved. That original connection continues to influence how they see happiness, meaning, and emotional fulfillment in their life, even if they do not express it openly. It becomes part of their internal reference point for future emotions and relationships. This is why their external behavior can sometimes feel disconnected from their internal reality in quiet and subtle ways. There is often a silent contrast between what they show to others and what they actually feel inside their heart. This contrast is not always intentional or even fully recognized by them, but it becomes more noticeable over time as awareness slowly grows within them. Questions begin to surface naturally in their mind as they reflect more deeply on their choices and feelings. These questions are not forced, but they arise on their own when the mind becomes more honest with itself. Over time, this leads to a deeper level of emotional awareness that cannot be ignored anymore. At the same time, the person who once asked for honesty and emotional presence is also growing and changing with time. They are not standing still or waiting in the same emotional place anymore. Instead, they are becoming more grounded, more self-aware, and more certain of their own value as a person in this world. They are learning to trust themselves more deeply, to listen to their instincts, and to move forward with greater clarity in each step they take. This growth strengthens their sense of identity and reduces dependency on external validation. They begin to understand that their worth is not defined by someone else's uncertainty. This growth ensures that if any reconnection ever happens in the future, it will not come from emotional dependence, confusion, or longing. It will come from a place of strength, balance, and clear understanding of what truly matters most in life and in emotional connection. This shared growth becomes important because it protects both individuals from repeating the same patterns that once created distance between them. Lessons that were once painful become boundaries and awareness that guide future decisions. It allows any future interaction to be based on awareness instead of confusion, and on maturity instead of emotional instability. Another important truth that becomes clear through this process is that emotional presence goes beyond physical closeness alone. A person can be physically present in someone's life, yet emotionally still carry parts of another unresolved bond within them. Emotional connection does not always follow physical reality, and this creates inner complexity. Even when someone is physically with another person, emotionally a part of them can remain connected to an unresolved bond from before. This presence is quiet but steady, appearing in thoughts, memories, and comparisons that happen without conscious effort on their part. It becomes a background feeling that influences their emotional responses in subtle ways. In the end, everything comes back to awareness, growth, and truth that lasts over time. What was once unclear becomes more visible and understood. What was once avoided eventually comes into awareness when the mind and heart are ready to face it honestly. What was once hidden has now become visible clearly. What was once avoided has now been understood more fully by them. They have faced their fear, their hesitation, and the choices they made along the way, even if it took time to reach that understanding. And that process has changed how they see everything in their life moving forward. At the same time, you have grown into someone who no longer depends on confusion or mixed signals to feel certain about your worth as a person. You have learned to protect your peace, to trust your instincts, and to stand firmly in your self-respect without needing validation from anyone else around you. This inner stability becomes your foundation. What this creates is not a story about return or loss, but a clear understanding of what was real and what it required from both sides. It becomes more about truth and awareness than about waiting or hoping. Emotional clarity replaces emotional uncertainty. You represented something genuine, something meaningful, and something that asked for courage to hold. That truth has now been recognized, even if it came later than expected for them. But your journey does not pause for someone else's realization at any time in life. You continue forward with clarity, strength, and a deeper understanding of what you deserve and what you will no longer accept in your life. Growth continues regardless of whether others understand it at the same pace or not. So what remains is simple and clear for you. Stay grounded in your truth and trust the growth you have gone through with patience. Let your decisions come from clarity, not from old emotions or uncertainty that may still linger in the background. Emotional clarity brings stability, while confusion pulls you backward. What is meant to align with you will meet you with the same honesty, presence, and effort that you have always carried inside yourself. And anything that cannot meet you there will naturally fall away without force. This is how emotional alignment works over time. What is real stays, and what is not aligned fades without struggle. Like this video, comment which part touched you the most, and subscribe to receive more messages about emotional truth, growth, and self-worth.